Hello, my lovely. Well, just want to talk about police being forced to keep to a narrative that the government, Home Office, and security services have come out with. It can be all together, or one of them has come out with it, and the chiefs of the police forces have to go by this narrative. They can't deviate from it. And one thing you'll see that they're trying to avoid addressing or discussing in any way is the term two-tier policing. They don't want to be asked that question, and this became very evident when, after leaving a Cobra meeting with the government, Sir Mark Rowley, the chief of police, grabbed a reporter's microphone and pulled the top off it after he was asked the question about two-tier policing.
Are we going to aim two-tier policing, sir?
Now, I can tell you now, Mark Rowley is known as being a very relaxed police officer. He's not known to have outbursts of anger or anything. Well, I've never heard of him ever being like that. He's very laid back and very approachable. But that's an indication he's doing something he doesn't want to do. He doesn't want to follow the government's narrative. So when he's asked about two-tier policing, that triggers him. It's triggered, obviously, something in him that he has been told at that Cobra meeting that he doesn't want to comply with. And that is, you will follow the governmental line. See, there's two types of chief police officers. There's chief police officers who, through pure grit and getting out and learning the job on the beat, on ground level, rose through the ranks. And then there's what we have now a lot of is textbook university chief police officers who are very politically minded. And that comes first. And they know to get up the ranking ladder, they have to be politically minded. Now, I've always said the police are political. We know they are. Look what happened during the Thatcher era. It was obvious there that the police were a parliamentary police force. And I think we can see now that the police, again, are being used as a parliamentary police force. And when a police officer is that triggered, especially chief officer, by the word two-tier policing, that he actually does that action and grabs the microphone to silence it, that is basically symbolic of he's being silenced. That's as I see it. That grabbing the microphone is he has been silenced, and subconsciously that's why he's taken the microphone and silenced it, because he's been silenced. So there you go. There's the evidence, as we're saying. They are controlled by the Home Office. See, the line is with policing is they always tell you that, no, they're not a parliamentary police force. They're a police force for the public. They say, it's always the same buzzwords, saving our communities.
Police officers have been subjected to sustained levels of violence as they try to protect the communities they serve.
Wait for that, saving our communities. No, they don't. They save the Home Office and they save the government of the day. That's what they save. And your communities will be saved under the dictate of what or how the government want the communities to be saved. That's one that they do. And we join up to protect society. Really, I don't think every single police officer goes in there joining up to protect society. I think what they're doing, they're thinking it's a good earner and a good pension at the end of it. That's what I used to hear a lot of them talking about, the pensions and good earners, and that if there wasn't a good pension and good money, they wouldn't be in the job. So that's the mundane reality of it. And another thing you'll hear officers complain about, and they've been complaining about this for years, really since the Thatcher days, is the politicization of the police. And you can see that in the supporting the LGBTQI communities really strongly with the Pride marches when the police are going on the Pride marches. Now, for anyone who thinks that those police officers on that Pride marches are all LGBTQI, they're not. Only a very, very small group will be. But they're told to get out onto those marches. It's not because the chief officers want them to. It's because the Home Office dictates it. They've been dictating it for a good 30 years now, that's what the police should be doing. So when you hear people like Esther McVeigh going on, we will end this woke nonsense, we will not have rainbow lanyards, we will not have this. Do you remember when she used to carry on? What she wasn't telling you, that the worst for actually doing that was the Tory Home Office. Just look back at Stonewall. When the Tories first got into power as a coalition government with the Lib Dems, you'll see that the Home Office was put top of the Stonewall Diversity Champions list. Very, very quickly, too quickly for it to be assessed whether they were LGBTQI friendly or not. I could go into that much, much more about Stonewall and how, in my mind, they're just a money-making scam. That's all they are. But I'll leave that for another video. Anyway, they were top of there, and it was them that was insisting on all this. So when you heard people like Esther McVeigh going on, we have to stop this woke nonsense. We have to stop it. We will not have lanyards and all this business. Rainbow lanyards. We're going to stop all this nonsense. After being in government for 14 years and realising that the public weren't impressed by all this wokery, what she wasn't telling you, that was the Home Office that was doing that, insisting on it. Not the police themselves, it was the Home Office insisting on it. And I saw that for myself, which I'll tell in another video, where they were collating numbers to prove that they were diverse and diverse friendly. That was interesting. Helen King, when she was a deputy chief constable. No, she wasn't a deputy, was she? No, assistant chief constable. Correction, assistant chief constable. When this event happened, which I'm going to very briefly mention now, I could tell some things about Helen King and what she said in that room that day, and she didn't like my response to her, I can assure you. But there's evidence of the government actually dictating to the police. And another example is when the policing cuts were being introduced, and there was a big kick-off from officers, and they were going on demonstrations and everything over these cuts and pay and other things. Well, they weren't happy at all. They weren't happy one bit. Now, the chief superintendents, get this, had a meeting with Theresa May, and suddenly they're applauding her. It was on, I remember seeing it coming on Twitter, what was called Twitter then, and them applauding, saying, oh, they're getting around applause from the chief superintendents. And it was so telling. The thing is, the chief officers are so out of touch with the ground level on the beat officers. Now, I always said, are they out of touch? The way you say to this officer, said, we know they're not out of touch, said they know damn well how hard they do, and the reality of the job is. They know what it is. They're just focused on their own careers and getting up the ranking ladder. That's all they're concerned about. So that when Theresa May made it clear their nests wouldn't be defeathered, they'd still have their comforts and their luxuries. They couldn't have cared less. So when you hear these senior officers, chief officers coming out, my brave police officers, my brave troops, I can tell you now, they couldn't give a damn about them as long as their nests are well feathered. And they're the ones that are given the golden eggs, I can assure you. I mean, we all heard the Chief Constable Merseyside Police, Serena Kennedy, saying that they'd sent the same officers back into the riot situation that had to deal with the horrific stabbing scene of those poor children. You know, how is that caring? sending the same officers back in there. They must have been absolutely traumatised. There's the little clues you look for. Don't look for the bump. My brave officers, my heroic officers and all this business. Just read between the lines and ask you, why would anyone that cared about them send them back in? Because they're considered just cannon fodder, for want of another word. They know they're being dictated to by Parliament. See, there's this myth that goes around, it's a total myth. The Pelian values that the police are the public and the public are the police. There's no difference. And it's a total myth. They're very quick to abandon or forget that Pelian value when they don't need to call for the public to be on side, when they start referring to civilians or civvies in the police itself. I won't go into a big history lesson here about the creation of the modern police, but the term civilian police officer does not refer to them policing civilians. It refers to the police officer themselves being a civilian. There's no such thing as a non-civvy working in the police. It's to distinguish them from the military police. But that's the truth about it. But to get back to the subject in hand, this being dictated to, do you see how, with the examples I've given, that a narrative is given out and the police have to follow that narrative, and politicians will never admit, the hold they have over the police and the way they do dictate to the police. Why do you think your local councillors and MPs are meeting up with the police to discuss things with them? Because they're dictating. That's what they're doing. They're dictating to them. So when Sir Mark Rowley did that, he pulled that mic and silenced it. As I said before, to me that's symbolic of him being silenced, and he doesn't want to be silenced. There's many officers want to speak out, but they can't speak out. Chief officers, I'm not saying, let me get it this way, don't get from reading that I'm saying that these are all on the public side, but it must be frustrating to know that they've gone into a meeting and just been told exactly what they've got to say and don't divert from it. You can see it. Just watch how the Prime Minister, the Home Secretary, chief officers respond when someone mentions two-tier policing. They try to get off the subject. Mention Leeds as the glowing example of two-tier policing, and they won't dwell on it. They won't, oh, it's different forces have different approaches. No, that's not an explanation of what happened there. That is not an explanation. But that's my thoughts on it, my lovelies. I think that's what's happening here. Mark Rowley is just frustrated that he's being forced to speak from a narrative. And if we want a police force that are unbiased, without fear or favour, that's another buzzword. Glad of those mentioning that. Without fear or favour. That's another one. My back. Actually, I'm just going to go off on a little tangent if I carry on that. But that's another buzzword to look out for. Yet there's a lot of fear. Oh my God, I might not get the next step up the rank and ladder if I don't do what my bosses, the politicians, tell me to do and say. So anyway, I'll leave it at that, my lovelies.